Everybody, happy Tuesday to you, and welcome to another hour, more or less, of good nature. I have to tell you, last week when I invited you all to settle in with a cozy, warm beverage, I made the major mistake of making my beverage a chai tea. I was up all night. Made for some interesting, nature viewing and things like that till about 2 o'clock, when I thought, boy, I have got to try and settle down, and I didn't. I maybe got an hour or so of sleep. So anyway, upshot of that, this week we're going with chamomile tea. So it's supposed to be very soothing and relaxing. So if I doze off, I apologize in advance. Got some interesting things to share with you tonight. And I mentioned in the email that we've got some viewer discretion advice. It's nothing, raunchy or smutty or anything like that, but it's a little, insensitive for delicate viewers. So why don't we go ahead and take a look, huh? All right, let's see if I can get the screen share going here, and we will go with our good-natured hour for this week. Viewer discretion advised. And John and Bobby, I have to thank you for this. We're going to start with a look back in time. These were photos from December of 2020. So it was still back during the pandemic here. Some interesting looking scat, actually some interesting looking scat content. This was in a cornfield in DeKalb County. And these seeds in this scat, I think we talked about it at the time, they're huge. These seeds, if you've ever bought butter beans, they're a good sized bean. They're close to a quarter. Well, they are probably longer than a quarter in length, not quite as wide as a quarter, but good sized seeds were in this scat. And I think I took a couple different angles on it. My best guess was this was a raccoon. Again, it was in a cornfield. You can see there's some other content there in the scat. And being December, other creatures that might eat plants, like say a woodchuck, I don't know if they would eat a seed like that anyway, and if they did, they would probably have ground it up. But these were slurped down whole. So best guess is raccoon. If anybody else has any thoughts on it, I'd appreciate hearing it. But the reason why this is relevant is because it is right now in northern Illinois. It is pawpaw season. Now this isn't a terribly common small tree or shrub, fruit-bearing plants, should we call it, in our area, but there are pockets of it. Pawpaw, Illinois, sort of a famous, well, locally famous location, known for having pawpaws growing along some of its streams. I had taken some pictures, I think it was last year, at Richard Young Forest Preserve, not to be confused with Dick Young Forest Preserve. We have the more familiar name for our preserve here in Kane County, but in Kendall County, there's the Richard Young Forest Preserve on Route 71 in Yorkville. There's pawpaws that grow there. And the reason I'm bringing this up, Bobby and John, you had shared with me this article, which I thought was interesting. And that there are people that are actually growing pawpaws, and there's a pawpaw festival, and who should win but a local DeKalb man. Now, in reading the article, I know, fruit growing, it's a whole section of agriculture, and I know absolutely nothing about it, but he did take first prize amongst what sounded like some pretty stiff competition. I guess folks in the Appalachians take their pawpaws pretty seriously, but this guy was able to come out on top. But what he was growing, he used some local stock for his root stock, but then he he grafted pawpaw stock from somewhere in Michigan. And that's what the fruit grew on. So he's taking the title for Illinois, and he says that it's Northern Illinois fruit. And yes, it was grown here, but it sounds like he brought the stock in from Michigan. So I don't know how the sound doesn't sound like the judges care much about it, but I didn't. I don't know. It just sort of seemed like maybe he was playing fast and loose with the rules there. But anyway, it is pawpaw season, and this is the time. So you can look for the fruits. We're actually probably getting close to the end of pawpaw season now. We've gotten into October now. This gentleman picked his fruits back in mid-September, which is when the competition was, and he is apparently he's tried in the past, and he will probably be trying again in the future. But if you happen to be out, and again, the pictures that I took were in DeKalb County. I can't think offhand of any pawpaw groves here in Kane County, but again, I know we have viewers and listeners who aren't even local here in Illinois. But if you see some scat and it's got these peculiarly large seeds. Oh, what did I just do? Let's go back here. You're looking at pawpaws. So that's the first part of the tonight's program. Let's go a little farther. It's gonna get worse before it gets better. I took this picture of one of the two bird watering areas that I have in my area. It's really just on either side of my deck, but they were equally trashed, and they have been for the last week or so. And what I noticed is that there are large bands. The robins, robins, they spent a lot of spring and summer raising broods. I think some in our area even do 3 broods, which is a lot to crank out over the course of the warm weather months. But they're in a different mode now. And they, when they're in the breeding mode, they are in with their family group. So the parents and the offspring. And then, once the offspring leave the nest and the parents go on to the next brood, and we don't see large groups of them. But as we get into fall, their behavior is changing. They're not in a breeding mode. They're not territorial. They're gathering together because, as we know, there's safety in numbers. They're taking full advantage of the resources that are out there. There's still a lot of bugs. We haven't had a killing frost. There's still that sort of food for them, but their diet is very definitely shifting to the fruits that will sustain them through much of the winter. And I think it's really interesting to see just what all those fruits are composed of. And again, I apologize, it's not a pretty picture, but if we zoom in, we can see there's a lot of these bits here are very dark. And then over here on the right part of this picture, we can see some smaller seeds. There's some larger seeds contained in the scats that are on the left. I didn't do any kind of, scientific analysis, but just looking at the types of seeds that I was washing out of the dish itself, I was seeing some large seeds, which I think were hackberries. And I was also seeing what looked like the pits from the seeds from grapes. I saw what looked to be kind of orangish cast to them, which I guessed would be honeysuckle berries. And then of course, some of these really dark scats are either from pokeweed or from buckthorn. And that reminded me of an article that we'd referred to it during a program probably a couple of years ago when we talked about buckthorn. There's a neat blog that's called Net Results. And it's published by a woman who's a bird researcher. Got it here. I believe her name is Julie. Anybody who's interested in reading this blog post or other ones, let me know and I can send you the link to her site. But yes, net results, and I think that's a little pun, bird researchers renowned for their humor. Net, I think maybe refers to misnet, because a lot of the work does involve banding birds. But anyway, this blog post was from back in 2011, and it was called Myth Busting: Birds, Buckthorn, and Diarrhea. And the gist of it, and this is something I remember learning years and years ago. Buckthorn, it's what we see so much of around here is the invasive European buckthorn. And its biggest crime is that it blocks the sunlight from reaching the floor of our local woodlands. And when the sunlight can't get down to the floor of the woods, it doesn't encourage the germination of seeds of things like oak trees, which is one of the predominant species in our woods. And when we don't get oak regeneration, our woods start to and the buckthorn starts to take over, we end up with these thick monocultures. Well, the species name, the scientific name for the buckthorn that is the most pernicious around here is Rhamnus cathartica. And it was one of the first things I learned when I transitioned into this field, that cathartica, it speaks to the catharsis that occurs when things ingest the berries from this shrub. It cleanses. It cleanses. It has a cleansing effect, should I say, on mammals. But what we see in birds is that it doesn't really have that effect. Again, this article is really interesting, and it talks about the chemical properties of buckthorn, imodin, which, not to be confused with Imodium. Some of you might be familiar with that over-the-counter drug, but imodin is the component that causes the cleansing effect, and it certainly does do that in mammals, but it doesn't have that effect. The mature berry, for one, doesn't have a lot of that compound in it. The unripe berries do, but the more mature berries do not. In fact, I think I've got some pictures here, don't I? Let me move along here. Robins. This is a little colony of buckthorn that I walk past frequently when I come into the office here. The trees, the female buckthorn trees, are just loaded this year with these dark berries. And they, this diarrhea effect that buckthorn is somewhat famous for, it doesn't really have that effect in birds. They process it as they would other fruits. They get whatever nutrient content is in there, but it doesn't come shooting out. Birds are still definitely dispersing the seeds. In fact, I'm constantly pulling little buckthorn seedlings out from underneath my deck where those bird baths are. But anyway, we're definitely seeing a shift in the behavior of birds, and for our fruit-eating birds, which there are many robins, but also catbirds. I just heard a catbird again yesterday. They're still around. They're using these fruits as food. Swallows that are moving through. There's a lot of tree swallows that are moving through. And remember, we talked about how they are primarily insectivores, but if they can't find insects, they'll rely on fruit. So they might even be grabbing a few of these too. Anyway, be aware, even if you don't have a bird bath in your yard, you might be realizing or seeing some of this effect on your cars too, if you happen to park underneath a tree where a bird might be perching. But So it was really interesting, this myth busting. If you'd like me to send you the link to this blog, just let me know. I'd be glad to do that. There's lots of other interesting articles there too that she writes about. From there, we're going to go on to a heartwarming tale. I had occasion to call my friend Nikki. Nikki for years worked at the DuPage Forest Preserve District. She's retired now. And we've been friends for a long time. We've got a lot of things in common. We have an affinity for turtles. We love our insects. Nikki, at one time, she had many different types of insects that she curated in her house, kept different types of bug fig. She and I would sometimes compare notes on the walking sticks that we were rearing. Anyway, as I was talking to her, she was telling me about this fellow right here. This is a male paper wasp. And we know it's a male because it's got a yellow face and it's got a curly aspect to the ends of its antennae. It doesn't work with all species, but it works with these guys. And this is her latest pet. And the reason it's become a pet is because of this not so great thing. What we're looking at here are deformed wings. This is a problem. It can infect lots of hymenopterans. It's believed the damage is believed to occur in the pupal stage when these are pupating, and it's thought to be caused by a virus. I don't know how the virus is transmitted. Some of the information I was able to find said there might be a connection with varroa mites, which are known to infect, be a big problem for our honeybee hives. But there's also phorid flies that have been known to transmit it too. So I'm not going to get into how it happened, but the thing of it is this wasp has deformed wings. Well, Nikki happens to have a swimming pool in her yard, and this little guy fell in, and so she fished him out, and he fell in again, and she saw him, and she fished him out again. Each time she was able to find him before he drowned. Well, here, this is the third time she fished him out with the pool skimmer. And she thought, there's something, we can't stop meeting we have to stop meeting like this. So she made him into a pet, and she picks flowers for him and he feeds off of them. She gives him grapes to get moisture from. She cuts open grapes, and she said that they've kind of got this little bond now. Who would have thought, that a paper wasp, she said, he expects, well, and one of the things we talked about was how wasps do have facial recognition. That reminded me of the time, I think it was just last year, when I had made a video of, it was a yellow jacket colony over at the Morton Arboretum. I saw them going in and out of a tree stump, and I thought it would make a really cool video. So I turned my phone on, put the video on, stuck my hand in there. No wasps came after me. I didn't get stung. I couldn't believe it. I held it in there for about 30 seconds. I got some really cool footage of yellow jackets at work. I pulled my hand out, turned the phone off, walked away. I was probably 50 feet down the trail away from the yellow jacket nest, and they got me. I had several land on my shirt, on my sleeves. I did get stung, but they tracked me down. I guess it took them that long to sound the alarm and gather the troops and then go out after me, but they were able to recognize me as the offender. So anyway, it's a neat little story. Nikki also happens to take really good pictures. I thought this one of him looking at her over the leaf was just adorable. I'm hoping to have Nikki as a guest speaker some night here on the Good Natured Hour, but she plays in a ukulele band, and they happen to have practice on Tuesday night. So I don't know if we'll be able to get her or not, but maybe we can get some more material from her in the future, because she's pretty cool, has lots of good stories to tell. Now this, Kim, this came, I guess, as a result of a work day over at Johnson's Mound. The co-steward.
Actually, Greg was out there being the Energizer bunny that he is, all by himself.
Overachieving, huh?
Yeah, he was out in the area called G9. It's off Pooley Road. It's a newer area of the, anyway.
Okay.
So.
Well, there's some tools of the trade there. He's got floppers out, and let's watch again. He happened to notice that he was not alone there in the field. Let's see if I can stop it. What do we have here? First of all, let's let me see if I can. Oh, this isn't going to let me zoom in. Let's admire the speed of this creature before we talk about what she is. Whoa, how about that? I think some of the little ones might have been casualties there. I don't know that they all were able to hang on when Mom floored it and shot out of there, but Greg did take a still shot from that incident, and we can zoom in on that. So here we have a wolf spider. Now, I'm not an arachnologist, so I don't know exactly how you identify down to species, but this certainly had all the markings of the rabid wolf spider, which isn't terribly common around here. I've seen them in southern Illinois. I've never run into one around here though. So he was lucky. Kim, do you know, was this just recently that this happened? I'm not sure when Greg took this video, but I got the impression it was fairly recent.
Yeah, it was just last week.
Okay, which it seems a little late to be carrying young, but they do live for several years. So I guess, if they're all able to find a nice spot to overwinter, it might even be easier to hide when you're smaller than it is when you're larger. I've got a kick too out of this cricket over here. Here's a male field cricket up here to the left of the spider, was probably saying, don't see me, don't pay, I'm invisible. Because wolf spiders, they do not hunt, they do not spin webs for capturing prey. They're ambush predators, and they rely on that great speed sometimes to track down their prey. But I just thought this was a really cool shot of a really impressive looking spider. Despite the name rabid wolf spider, I think it has more to do with the veracity of its prey drive than it does. They do not carry rabies, but Rabidosa rabida is the scientific name for it, if that is indeed what this spider is. It was a cool capture, and I appreciated him sharing it. Oh gosh, it doesn't look like I can zoom in much farther. But you can kind of see the eye pattern. Eye pattern is one really useful means of identifying different types of spiders. We do have in this area a spider that has a similar pattern up there on the cephalothorax, those stripes like that. It's not exact, but a quick glance, sometimes you might think you're looking at a wolf spider when you're actually looking at a grass spider, which we've talked about at length in previous episodes. Grass spiders, though, they do spin webs. They're the ones that we're seeing right now, those huge masses of funnel webs that are spread out on grass and on bushes, flat surfaces where they can spin a very broad, flat mat of webbing. So yeah, that was a really cool capture. Have you ever seen spiders like this yourself at Johnson's Mound, Kim?
Well, I was just going to say that this is actually in a field. It's not really in the woods.
Okay.
I mean, and this is along Pooley where they have these little spots, and they had contractors plant some trees over the years, but it's mostly just a grassy field. In fact, it's on one of the list of possibly being burned this fall. So hope little Spidey has a safe place to be if they do burn it. So
Boy, you're either too cold or you're too hot.
right, yeah. So, but it's mostly a field, and we've been out there on a work day, but Greg is just like really he spends a lot of time out there cutting down invasive things. Surprise.
Okay.
So but it is a grassy field, so I don't just so you know. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's an important thing to know. Yeah, because they probably have certain habitat requirements. They are the ones that I tend to see in the woods, and where I see a lot is in the springtime. When we do the salamander traps in the woods at Hickory Knolls, they're pitfall traps. So they're Ryan, our restoration ecologist, he'll dig holes in the ground, and then he'll put buckets that are then flush with ground level, and he'll put some water and then a sponge in there. So the salamanders that he's after will have a means of staying damp but not drowning. Well, it also helps save a lot of spiders. So I've been known to on occasion go out there and empty all the spiders out, but they are not this type. There's a European wolf spider that I think is what we see a lot of in the woods. It's still got some patterning on the that head and thorax area, but it's not where are we at there? It is not as they're just, these are, I've never seen one of these, and I have seen a lot of these other darker ones. The pronounced pattern on the cephalothorax is absent in those European ones. So definitely thank you, Greg, again, Kim. We are probably going to be taking the Good Natured Show back down to WGN in October and talking about spiders. So it could be that this little gal will hit the big time if we get to show some of these pictures when we go down there again. All right, let's go on. Miss Bonnie, you sent us this picture of a Chinese praying mantis on some of your asters. It looks like it's eating a bumblebee. And that, so there's a whole lot of bad information on Facebook, but there's good information there too, depending on what you look at, and certainly always want to verify things that you find on there. But I do follow a group called Insects and Spiders of Illinois, and there was a debate that sparked this weekend on the benefits versus the detriments of having non-native praying mantises in your yard or in an ecosystem. And these insects are so interesting. Even when they're Chinese or European, there's a lot of people who still think they're cool and think they should be protected. Well, somebody finally published or shared a link to some published research. There was a couple different things that they looked at. One was a study, and they looked at the effects of positive, whether they were positive, negative, or neutral impacts on their surrounding environment. They looked at the Chinese mantis, the European mantis, and the Carolina mantis, which is the 3 species that are most common here in Illinois. And they found that the overall effect wasn't really that bad for any of them, but the study, which it was a literature review, they weren't actually going out and studying the animals themselves. They were reading the studies that other people had done, and the net effect wasn't overly bad for any of them. Wasn't really overly good either. They did emphasize in the literature review that these are generalist predators. So they said that greater damage can occur if a specialist predator comes in, because they're focusing in on one you know, family or genus or species, and that can have a very real impact on those chosen prey. But as far as being generalists, they're just grabbing whatever they can. It might be something beneficial like a bumblebee. It might be something equally negative like another praying mantis. But in that link that was shared on Facebook, it then listed a number of other studies that had cited that literature review. And one of them, it was published in, that literature review went back to 2011, but then a subsequent study that was published in, it was another review of published reports. It was not actual research in the field, but it was looking at bird predation by praying mantises, a global perspective. This was published in the Wilson Journal of Ornithology in 2017. And they reviewed 147 incidents of the capture of small birds by mantids. This has been documented in 13 different countries on all continents except Antarctica. We found records of predation on birds by Stagmomantis, which is the genus that the Carolina mantis belongs to, and Tenodera, which is what the Chinese mantis belongs to. And then they go ahead and list the different families of birds that were preyed upon. It says of the birds captured, 78% were killed and eaten by mantids, 2% succeeded in escaping on their own, and 18% were freed by humans. They said that hummingbirds were probably the most common birds that were grabbed by the mantids. It says in North America, native and non-native mantids were engaged in bird predation. Our compilation suggests that praying mantises frequently prey on hummingbirds in gardens in North America. Therefore, we suggest caution in the use of large-sized mantids, particularly non-native mantids in gardens for insect pest control. Well, yeah, I'd agree with that, but I'd also want to point out that it was they looked at 147 published accounts of bird predation, and by published it could be in a peer-reviewed journal, it could be a YouTube video. They had a number of different sources that they looked at, including books and social media. Well, and they went back a really long time. This wasn't 147 birds in one season, or over a couple of year period. They went back several decades to come up with these different accounts. So 147 birds over a multi-decade time period to me doesn't seem like a whole lot, but again, these are only the published accounts. So the Wilson Journal of Ornithology, where this was published, it says, they urge caution in the use of non-natives. The people on the insects and spiders website, there was a pretty good debate going on. I personally, I can't kill things. I kill things by accident, I should say. But to see a praying mantis and to squish it, I just can't quite do that. But when I see Chinese mantid egg cases, I most definitely do. And I'll show one at the end as a reminder of what they look like. I've got one here I can hold up for you. But yeah, removing the eggs, which each egg sac each egg case can hold I've heard 200 to some people say 250 eggs. That's a lot of little babies. And granted, they're not all going to survive. The first thing they do is they eat each other. So the smaller ones or the weaker ones or the sicker ones don't make it right out of the egg case. But removing these, I've got quite a sack of them in the freezer over at the Nature Center. That's, if you do want to help make an impact, that's probably the easier thing to do. You're not squishing things and ending a life like that. But you're also then reducing the future numbers. So something to think about. As we get into the colder weather months, once the leaves are off, the foliage comes down, you'll start to see these egg cases on the stems of both woody and herbaceous plants. They're not terribly specific about where they deposit them. And by they, I'm referencing our Chinese friends, because they are the largest of the praying mantises. From there, let's go to, and Miss Bonnie, again, thanks for sharing that photo. We've got some other field correspondence here from, why can't I get this to advance? There we go. Laura, and I'm not sure if Laura was able to join us tonight or not.
If it's my sister Laura, no, she's not on tonight.
Okay, well, she went out, bless her heart. We talked, and I've had this reminder on, well, and you know what, Jerry, you could just say you're Laura. We would never know the difference. Just change
I don't know what you're talking about.
Change your log on. Playing the part of Laura tonight is Jerry. Well, so for over a month now, my calendar has been reminding me that it's time to go out and look for skunk cabbage fruit. And it's something, skunk cabbage is on my calendar every year, but it's always in February, because that's when this plant, that's when its flowers are out. It's the earliest blooming wildflower that we have in this area. And it was when I was looking at the flowers this past spring that I saw some of the remains from the fruits. And I thought, oh, that would be so cool to go out and look for these fruits. They kind of look like miniature pineapples. And each, if you can picture the like sort of diamond shaped segments on a pineapple, well, each one of those segments on the skunk cabbage has a seed in it. And I thought it'd be really cool to go out and look for them. Well, Laura went ahead and looked, and this is what she saw in the areas where we know skunk cabbage grows over at Fearston Creek Fen. She found these shoots coming up. So these will probably be what flowers as we get into late winter and early spring. But she didn't see any fruits over there. So the quest continues. And if any of you know where there's skunk cabbage, good stands of it, I'd encourage you to go out and look and see if you can find them too. They're the fruits are, I would say, the size of a large plum. Holding my fingers up, I don't know if you can see that. What else would be that size? Maybe like the slightly larger than the pit of an avocado, but good size. You don't need to have super great eyes to see them. They're quite dark too. They're either a dark maroon or almost a brownish black color too. So keep your eyes open if you happen to be in an area where skunk cabbage grows. See if you can find some fruits. And if you do, send me a picture. I'd love to see them. I'm hoping to get out there sometime in the next day or two. I think it's supposed to get cold and rainy on Thursday. So maybe tomorrow I'll try and head out and see if I can get a picture. But so Laura found that. And then she found evidence of crayfish burrows. So these are about the same size. These holes often are about the same size as what you'd see a chipmunk digging, but chipmunks don't like to dig where it's wet and muddy. And of course, crayfish, they need to be wet and muddy or they won't survive. So so how these are formed is the crayfish, and they've got, they're two, we'll call them pinchers, and they use those for a number of different things, but our burrowing crayfish, the ones that live primarily on land, but the way they survive is by digging down to where they hit water. Then they come out of these holes at nighttime or when it's raining, when it's safe for them to forage. They do have gills, but as long as those gills remain moist, they don't actually have to be in water in order for those gills to be able to work. They just need to keep them moist. So they come out when conditions are moist, when it's humid at night or when it's raining out. But they dig these burrows by first pulling soil out with their pinchers, and then as they get farther and farther in, they roll little balls of soil up to the top, and they pile them up in what's commonly referred to as a chimney. So being at Pearson Creek Fen, a wetland, that's a great habitat for crayfish, and it's good to know we've got our terrestrial burrowers still being active over there. And then Laura saw something near the road. It was a pile of bones, and she wanted to know what it was. Let's see if you all have some guesses. See if I can, see, I can't focus, zoom in on this either. I guess when I grab photos from other sources, the zoom feature gets turned off on here, but so here's the skull, and there's a lower jawbone over here on the left. Got some vertebrae in here and some leg bones. This, and it's funny, it's almost, it's not impossible, but it's really hard in this area to find bones that aren't, if they're this size, they're raccoon, and that's what this is. If they're bigger, they're deer. Those are, I would say, 90% of the bones that are brought to Hickory Knolls for identification. I would say 90% of them are raccoons. And I guess A, it speaks to us having a pretty large raccoon population, and B, it speaks to their being prone to dying either from illness or from this one being close to the road. I'm guessing it probably got hit by a car, but those bones got nicely cleaned off, and Laura was kind enough to, doing her duty as a field correspondent, share her pictures with us. All right, with that, I'm going to stop the screen share. It looks like we got a couple of chats here to get to. Let's see. Oh, Sarah, I didn't know that you have several pawpaws at the Wildflower Sanctuary. They've not produced fruits. Are there boy and girl trees? You know, they need to be, you know, the pollination. I remember reading about this last year. It's kind of tricky, and pawpaw, it's one of the reasons why pawpaws aren't seen commercially very often, because to pollinate them, if you don't get the pollination by, they're not pollinated by regular pollinators. I don't know if it has to be an unrelated tree, but I kind of recall reading that it did. But they're maroon flowers, and they have an unusual scent. They don't attract our bees and butterfly types of pollinators. They attract more of the flies and beetle types of pollinators. I also, you know, the scat photos that I showed that had those seeds in them, I brought those seeds home, and I thought passing through a digestive tract might be the provide the scarification that the seeds needed. And I planted them in my yard, and I kept them nice and moist, but they never germinated. They never grew into anything. So I don't know, Sarah, I don't know, Miss Bonnie, I don't know if you're on tonight, if you have any thoughts on pawpaws and how they grow, but I do recall reading about them and how it is difficult to get them to fruit. And then that's why we don't see, it's apple season for sure in all the stores and the apple orchards and everything, but you don't see a huge pawpaw season because of that. And again, the guy who had the prize winning pawpaw, he was using grafted stock. So there might be, some sort of genetic variations there too that cause that fruit more readily than the native ones that we have around here. And you say that there used to be pawpaws over at on the tram tour at Arboretum. Yeah, I don't know if those are there. I remember seeing some along the Fox River in Kendall County. The pictures I showed of the pawpaw fruit, that was actually from a tree I saw in Kentucky. So that wasn't around here either. And that Kentucky is kind of more the heart of where these things grow naturally and prolifically. And it could be you just need a whole lot of them in order to ensure that the pollination occurs.
I don't recall that there was a grove. I think there was one tree. So next time I'm at Morton, I'll check it out for you.
Right. Well, they're an interesting tasting fruit. Again, the one I saw in Kentucky, there were several that were down on the ground. So I picked one up and it was soft, but it wasn't rotten. It actually smelled really good. And it's almost like eating pudding. It's got a soft consistency to it. And it's sort of, in fact, I think in that article, the gentleman said that the pawpaws are a lot like bananas. There's a peak where the texture and the flavor are just perfect. And if it's too soon, they're bitter. And if it's too late, they're not as good either. He described the flavor as like a mixture of banana and mango. And I remember the texture as being kind of like pudding. So yeah, maybe, with the way things are going with our climate, maybe we will be a real hotbed of pawpaw production sometime in the future. But yeah, Sarah, if I can find out any more about that pollination, I will shoot you a link or two. And then Jerry found an article in Audubon about how a praying mantis catches hummingbirds at feeders. It recommends placing feeders away from trees and shrubs. So that makes sense. Let's see if we can open. Of course, I'm not sharing the screen. No, that's a great article. So yeah,
it's got a really gross picture with it though.
Audubon magazine.
Uh-huh.
Let's see. Well, this is the sensitive viewer episode. So I'll go ahead and share this. Let's see. Let's get back to the right screen now.
It does mention that it's really rare.
Let's see. Are you seeing the picture now?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's rare, but it's gruesome. So yeah, that would make sense if you see these guys. I know a lot of people do relocate praying mantises from their hummingbird feeders, but all right, that's enough of that. Go away. All right.
Did they just kill them with one bite or something? How do they?
Well, so that I think they have a lot of strength in those two front legs. So they're able to grasp, and there's also, besides strength, those front legs are there's a lot of spines too that dig in, so it makes whatever the prey item is, it makes it hard to escape. And then when we did that segment at WGN on praying mantises last month, I was holding a Chinese mantid while we were talking, and she was chewing on this part of my hand. And it didn't bleed, but she chewed it raw.
Yuck.
And then the saliva, it was real itchy, and then it was sort of like a little rash for a few days because it was wet, whatever saliva or digestive, I don't know. I don't think it's digestive juices in them. I think it's probably just the saliva that helps them swallow things. But yeah, if if we'd done a 10-minute segment instead of a 5-minute segment, I might have had a hole in my finger.
You shouldn't be so delicious.
It's my natural sweetness, right? No, but so they do. I could see how if they were able to grasp it just right, but I still, something bigger than a hummingbird. That article lists, all these different species like Tyrannidae that, flycatchers, those are some pretty good sized birds.
I could see maybe a wren, like a little wren.
Wren, yeah. But yeah, I know like one of our restoration ecologists, if she's out clipping, seed heads or whatever, and she sees a mantis, well, it's off with its head too. I haven't gotten to that point. I can't kill something like that, but collecting egg cases, which is what I was going to show you. Just as a reminder, this is what we're talking about and this is the Chinese mantid that produces an egg case like this. Reminds me of a toasted marshmallow on a stick. But yeah, the more of these that you can collect and find, and I find if you put them in the freezer, especially if you leave the bag open, it dries them out and they don't hatch. We had several years ago, we tried, we were going to put these in kindergarten classrooms for the classes that were studying life cycles, so that there wasn't a whole lot of eggs being hatched and chickens then looking for homes. We thought, well, maybe we could do something on a smaller scale. Oh, and this was also going to classrooms that were doing the painted lady butterflies too. But we found that bringing them inside, even without putting them in the freezer, I don't know if it was temperature shock or again, the dryness of our indoor air, but we didn't have a real big hatch rate, even from those that we collect. I think we collected about 25 and maybe had 2 that opened with babies. So yeah, collecting them and getting them out of that, of our local native environments. I think that's the easiest and most effective way, if you feel that you want to get involved in their control.
I have a question about the praying mantis egg cases. Do the European ones look a lot different from the Chinese ones versus the Carolina ones?
I used to have a European one too, and I don't. So the Chinese are distinct with this shape. The other 2 do not look like this. But the European, it's maybe the size of 2 knuckles of my pinky finger. So what is that, about 1.5 inches or so? Not quite 2 inches. It's oblong, a similar color, and a similar like foamy texture, but it's an oblong case. It's not the melted roasted marshmallow shape.
Gotcha.
And it has I think of it as a little seam down one side. So it'll be stretched out along a twig or a stem, and then there's seam isn't the right entomological word, but it's a distinctly different shape. Now, the European and the Carolina, I think those 2 are similar. And again, until recently, I didn't consider a Carolina even a possibility here. But if you look on iNaturalist, you see there are some reports that seem to be have earned the research grade ID badge on iNaturalist. Oak Park, Cook County, couple in DuPage County. So it seems as though some people are starting to see the Carolinas up here. IDNR, all of their information still says that they're only in the lower 2/3 of the state. But guess we can never say never. So yeah, Sarah, I hope that answers your question on how to tell that from other species, but it's This shape is pretty distinctive for the Chinese, and the other ones are oblong. We have ginkgo trees with fruit in a nearby park. I'll have to keep an eye. Oh, yeah. So I've always wanted to try ginkgos, and some of the ones that I used to rely on, I would go and collect some of the stinky fruit for different programs that we would do. They're supposed to be kind of tasty. It's one of those things, I think, like, you know, just like stinky cheese, you know, you don't eat it with your nose. I think it's the same with the ginkgo berries too. So yeah, I'm gonna look around Geneva along Route 38. There are a lot of ginkgo trees in the like the high traffic areas downtown. I know they cut down the female one that I used to go to, but maybe there's some on the east side of town there where the foot traffic isn't quite so high. I'll go check.
I'm so not tempted to try one.
Yeah.
Not at all. Nope. I'd say I could bring you some, but they'd probably ferment by the time I made it out that way.
Well, did you go to U of I too, Jerry?
I did.
There was, and I know we've got some other Illini in the group too. I know there were some ginkgos, that the female ginkgos that grew. I want to say it was maybe between over by Lincoln Hall. It was on that side of the quad, and it was a cut through that I used to take frequently. And
I know that cut through, but I don't remember the ginkgos. Laura probably would, though. She's got a much better memory for you.
Well, and she and I still suspect we were in the same botany class, so
that's funny.
We might have even talked about it.
Yeah, she was a senior when I was a freshman.
Oh,
I used her ID inappropriately occasionally.
All the secrets are coming out tonight. Well, yeah, you know what? I'm going to put that on my list of things to look for this coming week. If I can find some ginkgo berries, that would be kind of a fun thing to try, and maybe report back to you on how they taste, or maybe offer some to you if anybody'd like to
just
join.
make sure they're not poisonous first, Pam.
Yeah, right, yeah, right.
We don't want to lose you.
Forget. All right. Well, with that, folks, does anybody else have anything they care to share for the good of the group tonight? If not, very much appreciate you tuning in again, and we'll look forward to another Good Nature Hour again 1 week from now. All right. Have a good week, everybody. Take care.
Thanks,
Stay
Pam.
warm.
You have a good
Thank
night.
you, Pam.
Thanks,
Hello.
Pam.
Have a good one.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you.